The Trumpet Daily with Stephen Flurry.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Trumpet Daily radio show. It's great to be back with you. Lots going on in the news, lots happening in the work of God, and lots happening here at God's College. They finished off their final exams yesterday, as I said on the program yesterday, and now we're off and running into the graduation festivities. So the next few days should be lots of fun and lots of fellowship with families of graduates. Well, this tweet seems like it happened such a long time ago. This is March of 2017. Remember when President Trump tweeted this out? He said, "Terrible, just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found." He says, "This is McCarthyism." And if you remember the reaction to that tweet, oh, he was a conspiracy theorist. There is no truth to that. There is no way that Obama's people were spying on the Trump campaign. It's just not possible. And now think about what we know. Now think about the evidence. It's piling high, day in and day out. They used to talk, at least Brian Stelter did, drip, drip, drip on the Trump-Russia collusion. And now look at the drip, drip, drip of all the evidence exposing this fraud, exposing the hoax, exposing the lawlessness, exposing the corruption inside the Obama White House, right inside the Obama administration. And then yesterday we learned all about the unmasking. All these people in the Obama administration, everybody it seems except the nighttime janitor, snooping on General Flynn. You remember when Barack Obama told us that his White House never interfered in investigations? We follow a very clear rule in our White House. We don't meddle in investigations. We let the DOJ, we let the FBI do its job. Remember when Susan Rice emailed herself on January 20th, 2017 and said, "Just want to let you know we've done everything by the book." She said it twice. It's all by the book. What book were they going by? Now we have all of this evidence that people, not just in the intelligence community, spying on General Flynn and what he was saying on the phone, but people right in the White House. Barack Obama's chief of staff, Vice President Joe Biden. They were all very interested, it seems, in what General Flynn, the incoming director of national intelligence, I think was his title, their opponent. And again, what's stunning about this revelation yesterday is I know the other side, Donald Trump's opponents, I know they're saying, well, this is just common, this is ordinary, this happens all the time. But the sheer number of people putting in these requests to unmask General Flynn, and then when you look at the timing, too, the dates of some of these requests, Obama's chief of staff, for example, putting in the request on January 5th, 2017, the same day Obama met with all of his intelligence officials to discuss the strategy for taking down Mike Flynn. And then, of course, Vice President Biden, he put in his request January the 12th. That was the same day that David Ignatius came out with his big reveal. General Flynn was talking to the Russian ambassador. That was in the Washington Post. Now, again, if you go back through the timeline, you'll remember that he made the call. General Flynn made this call in late December to the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. And then they were unmasked by a lot of people, dozens of people, the transcripts of these phone calls, and then, making matters much, much worse, the content of these phone calls, it was leaked to Ignatius at the Washington Post. That's a felony. But it was leaked by someone on that list that was revealed yesterday. And as I've been saying all week, this couldn't have happened. It would not have happened were it not for the fact that the major media, they were in on it. They're all part of the coup attempt. It's from the Wall Street Journal. It says a stunning 39 separate officials snooped on Mr. Flynn's conversations with foreign actors, lodging nearly 50 unmasking demands between November 30th, 2016 and January 12th, 2017. It says our sources say the nearly dozen redacted names, so we don't even know all the names. The ones redacted, it says, are on the list are likely intelligence types who might have a legitimate interest in knowing who their foreign targets were speaking to in the U.S., but most of the rest of them are partisan officials who had no business spying on their successors. No business. What did Samantha Power? She was the ambassador to the UN. What did she have to do with any of these investigations? She put in 7 requests to have these phone conversations unmasked. I think there were 5 or 6 people from the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department. Why was it important for them to know all about what Mike Flynn was saying on the phone? They were spying on an American citizen. And I guess a lot of Americans are totally fine with that. It says the list includes then White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough, then Vice President Joe Biden, then Secretary of Treasury Jacob Lew, Ambassador to the UN, and Obama confidant Samantha Power made no fewer than 7 requests. She requested 7 times for these intel reports to be unmasked, or for her to be able to see who Kislyak or whoever was talking to on the other end. Who was this U.S. person? Samantha Power, by the way, she testified, I think it was in late 2017. She was asked in the House of Representatives if she had ever attempted to unmask conversations relating to General Mike Flynn. And her response was that she had not, or that I don't recall making such a request. And she made, just from the list we saw yesterday, she made 7 requests. And she said, I'm assuming her testimony in 2017 was under oath, but whether or not it was, she lied. She lied. She had made 7 requests, and when she was asked about it by the Intel Committee, she said, I don't recall making a request. Didn't happen. Listen to what the former CIA director, John Brennan, what he had to say in testimony. This goes back to May of 2017. This was just a few days after the special counsel was appointed, Bob Mueller, and then the investigation was off and running, or it was continuing really, because it was off and running even before Donald Trump came into office. It was a counterintelligence investigation, supposedly, back then. And then Comey was like the bridge, because he was in there just long enough to take it from the counterintelligence investigation over to the Bob Mueller probe. And so here is John Brennan asked about this unmasking and if there were ever U.S. ambassadors involved or making requests for Flynn or whoever to be unmasked. This is clip 2.
Do you recall any U.S. ambassadors asking that names be unmasked?
I don't know. Maybe it's ringing a vague bell, but I could not answer with any confidence.
He couldn't answer with any confidence back then. He was a little hazy on that. This was just a few months After the unmasking, what did the Wall Street Journal say? 39 separate officials. Brennan, by the way, was one of them. 39 separate officials. Did any ambassadors, U.S. ambassadors, do this? I can't seem to remember that. It might be ringing a bell. I think there was an ambassador to Italy. He too, or she, whoever it is, put in a request. Look at the list online. 39 requests, 7 from Samantha Power. The Wall Street Journal says Mr. Flynn was unmasked by at least 4 U.S. ambassadors, 6 Treasury officials, and people connected to the Energy and Justice Departments and NATO. Everybody wanted to know. Everybody wanted it, not just in the intel community. Keep in mind that the whole reason that they're masked is that so people in the intel community can't just know every little thing about U.S. citizens. But these were people far beyond the intel community. You had people from the Energy and Justice Departments. You had 4 U.S. ambassadors. You had 5 or 6 people from the Treasury Department. It says then FBI Director James Comey, then CIA Director John Brennan, then Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. He also made the list. The Journal says this means they had access to the transcripts of any phone conversations Mr. Flynn had with foreign sources as he prepared to take power. So they were just spying away. The transition. So much for a smooth transition. This is something that Americans have traditionally prided themselves in. Well, whether it's going from a Republican to a Democrat or a Democrat to a Republican, it's going to be a smooth transition to the next administration. Not so in 2016 and 17. Here were the Obama officials doing everything that they could to destroy the incoming administration. And here are all of his defendants, people defending the Obama administration yesterday saying, well, this is just, now that it's out in the open, they fought and fought and fought to keep these sort of revelations undercover. And now that it's out there, now that it's been revealed, they say, well, there's really nothing extraordinary about this. It's just common. Here's what the AP said yesterday. In 2016, Obama administration officials received intelligence reports that were concerning but incomplete. Surveillance of Russia's ambassador to the U.S. revealed he had interacted with an unnamed American who may have been undercutting efforts to pressure Vladimir Putin's government using a common process known as unmasking. You see, now it's just common. Well, we do it all the time. Using a common process known as unmasking, they asked intelligence agencies to reveal the American's name. It was Michael Flynn, an advisor to President-elect Donald Trump. It says the unmasking of Flynn has become Exhibit A in Trump's unsubstantiated claim that he and his aides were the targets of a scandalous Obama administration witch hunt. So the Trump administration, they can't be trusted. They are into conspiracy theories. And as for what the Obama people were doing, well, this is just common. This is just common. They weren't saying this. They weren't saying what you heard yesterday, 2 or 3 years ago. They weren't saying this when testifying in 2017. They were talking about, well, yes, unmasking and then leaking to, that's very serious. I didn't do it. I don't know who did it. It is serious. It is a felony. But this is what, listen to John Brennan. This is from his May 23rd, 2017 testimony. And here again, he's asked about unmasking and just how he certainly, listen for yourself and see if you think it's something that's just, totally common and it's just done all the time. This is clip 1.
Director Brennan, why is it important to protect the identity of U.S. persons as part of our surveillance programs?
Because there is, I think, a right of all Americans to privacy, and that sometimes information is collected about U.S. persons who may or may not be involved in any manner of criminal activity. And therefore, respecting that privacy of U.S. citizens, the intelligence community goes to great lengths to cover the identities of U.S. persons if they happen to be included in an intelligence collection.
The intelligence community goes to great lengths to try to protect the rights of U.S. persons, U.S. citizens, the right to privacy. General Flynn, he didn't have that right. There at the end of 2016, 2017, and then you know the story. You know what happened after that. You know about the ambush on January 24th. You know about how that they pressured him into admitting he lied because they were going after his son. I saw this yesterday. James Clapper, this was on the day that, this is clip 5, by the way, but this was on the day that Flynn pleaded guilty. And here was Clapper, I think, on CNN, basically explaining what the Mueller team had done to Mike Flynn. Clip 5.
What is your reaction to today's news that Flynn has pleaded guilty and specifically to lying to the FBI about conversations he was having with the Russian ambassador?
Well, it's dramatic, but not surprising. It was kind of my take. I do know Mike's great devotion to his family. I'm surmising that the special counsel's office leveraged that awareness with respect to his son. And I think Mike would do whatever he could to preclude his son from legal jeopardy or even jail time.
James Clapper basically saying they took down Mike Flynn because they threatened his son. It's on CNN. The day that Flynn admitted that he lied. He had to. He had to. The government forced him. The Mueller probe forced him. If you don't admit to this crime, then we're going after your son. Here's James Clapper, the this is one of Obama's top officials. And he's saying, I surmise that the Mueller team went after, I know about how devoted he is to his family, so I wouldn't be surprised if they went after his son. And, General Flynn agreed to this because he didn't want to see his son go to jail. That's national news, National News Network. The truth is out. These people have been exposed. They're exposed more yesterday. And then all of them rushing to defend Barack Obama, saying, well, this is just common. That's not what John Brennan was saying in May of 2017. He said that they went to great lengths to cover the identity of U.S. persons because of their rights to privacy. In that same testimony, by the way, he was asked about the Steele dossier, and you can go back over the past 3 years and see how the story has constantly changed on that as well. Back in the middle of 2017, now we know that the dossier was all that they had, and that's a fraudulent document full of lies and innuendo. That's all that they had when they went to the FISA court to get those warrants to spy on Carter Page. That was the hook that they needed to see CNN run with so that they could keep this sham going. But back in May of 2017, John Brennan was saying, well, we weren't even really relying on the Steele dossier. Listen to what he said, clip 3.
Do you know if the Bureau ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of any court filings, applications, petitions, pleadings?
I have no awareness.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
Because we didn't. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. It was not.
Multiple lies there. And I actually watched the beginning of that hearing. He did swear to tell the truth. Nothing but the truth. They're shocked. Barack Obama was shocked over the weekend that the charges against Mike Flynn would be dropped by the DOJ because, well, he lied. And if we start letting off people who lied, that's unprecedented. These people were lying, and they're still lying. They've been lying from the beginning. The war here, it's over the truth. You have one side that's wanting to cast it to the ground, as Daniel 8 says. They want to bury the truth. And then even when the truth comes out, I'm usually in the UK, so I don't get to kind of switch between Fox News and CNN, but I did that yesterday afternoon. It's two different worlds. Two different worlds. I checked it briefly this morning. I could not find one story on the unmasking on CNN. Could not find one. It's not even covered. They're doing exactly what Brian Stelter wanted them to do. He led the way with the narrative on Sunday. I can't even believe that the conservative media would be obsessed with the Russia probe, with Mike Flynn, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and 9/11 is happening every day. It's the perfect cover for them. They're hiding behind the flu. They're hiding behind the flu. And deep in their heart of hearts, they know. They know they've been exposed. They know this is scandalous. All you have to do is turn the tables. What would they do if Jared Kushner was saying, I'd like to have all of these Obama people that were on the phone, these American citizens, yes, but I want to see what they were saying. What if Don Jr. was doing this? People in the Trump administration that have nothing to do with the intelligence community. What if they were snooping in on phone conversations that ordinary Americans were having with someone overseas? How do you suppose CNN would react to that? This is one of the greatest scandals in U.S. history, one of the greatest political scandals in history. And it's being exposed. You go back a few years, and all of them were saying about how serious it is to protect the rights of privacy for ordinary Americans. Great lengths. They went to great lengths to cover the identity of U.S. persons. But then along comes Samantha Power. She's the ambassador to the UN, and she needs to know everything about who General Flynn is talking to. Samantha Power, the Treasury Department. Listen to Rod Rosenstein. He testified this in June of 2017, clip 10.
If someone is to use the unmasking process for a political purpose, is that potentially a crime?
Yes, Senator.
A crime. If you're spying on a political opponent, if you're using the unmasking's common, they say now. If you unmask for a politically motivated reason, is that potentially a crime? Well, that's Rod Rosenstein in 2017 saying, yes, it is. And you know what? Unmasking it and then leaking it to the Washington Post, that's a felony. This says PJ Media. It says, because U.S. intelligence agencies are barred from spying on Americans without court approval, the names of citizens on NSA reports are masked to protect their identities. Flynn's name, however, was unmasked on transcripts of his conversations with Kislyak and subsequently leaked. Unmasking American citizens for political purposes is a criminal act. It's a criminal act. Criminal behavior. And it was just the sheer number, as the Wall Street Journal brings out, It's stunning. All this criminality. And you can't even find one story about it on CNN. Not even covered. In fact, they're going after Richard Grenell for giving this to the two senators that then released it yesterday. Why is he motivated politically to reveal this list? Should have never seen the light of day. They fought. They didn't want this list to see the light of day. Then it comes out and they say, well, it's just common. It happens all the time. Nothing to worry about here. We don't even need to cover it on CNN. You see how it works? It really, like I indicated yesterday, it exposes, yes, but it reveals a lot too about the way Satan thinks, Satan the devil. He's never, ever, ever going to admit that he was wrong. That's why you've never seen them say, we got it wrong on Trump-Russia collusion. We got it wrong on the Ukraine phone call. And speaking of phone calls, here again, the snooping, the leaking, that phone call that Donald Trump made, that was huge. He was impeached for it. The perfect call, as he says, where nothing happened. And yet that was so serious, that was so egregious, the way the radical left views it, that they had to go on and impeach him. And they wanted to convict him too. They just couldn't get enough votes. Here you have Samantha Power, the Secretary of the Treasury, ambassadors overseas. And you know, that too is revealing, because if you know anything about Crossfire Hurricane, it was an international effort. Why would some ambassador in Italy be putting in requests to the NSA to have this unmasked so that they could see what Mike Flynn was saying, so that they knew who it was? Well, you start connecting the dots. You see how intelligence agencies or officials here in the UK, where I used to be in the UK, Italy, Australia, they were all involved. It was an international effort to bring down the Trump administration. They were using plants. They were spying. They were doing anything that they could to try to show that Donald Trump was compromised, that he was a Russian agent. And even with all this criminal behavior, what did they come up with in the end? Nothing. Nothing. They had no evidence. And last week, we learned that even these very Obama officials, when pressed under oath, they admitted, we don't have evidence. I never did see evidence. I never did see direct evidence. Joe Biden was the last one on this list. The Wall Street Journal finishes off here. It says, the dates of the unmaskings raise further questions. The FBI's interest in Mr. Flynn was supposedly triggered by conversations starting December 29th, 2016. Yet Mr. Flynn was first unmasked a month earlier. See, this was all part of the transition. They were spying on everything Flynn did. It wasn't just the conversation on December 29th. You had requests in early December. You had it all through December. You had it all through January. Right up until the inauguration. Right up until January 12th, when Vice President Biden himself in the White House, hey, can you unmask this for me? I need to know who this U.S. person is. It says the McDonough unmasking takes place on January 5th, the day of the Oval Office meeting at which Mr. Flynn was discussed. Mr. Biden's unmasking request was made on January 12th, the day the Washington Post reported on the Flynn-Russia conversation. It says Mr. Biden has some explaining to do. Well, he's already explained away this week. And I played these clips the other day. Here's clip 6.
I know nothing about those moves to investigate Michael Flynn, number one. Number two, this is all about diversion.
You say you didn't know anything about it, but you were reported to be at a January 5th, 2017 meeting where you and the president were briefed on the FBI's plan to question Michael Flynn over those conversations he had with the Russian ambassador Kislyak.
Now, I thought you asked me whether or not I had anything to do with him being prosecuted.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was aware that they asked for an investigation, but that's all I know about it.
2 lies in a matter of, 2 minutes? Maybe less? First he says he didn't know anything about it. He didn't know anything about an investigation. Then he said, well, I did know about the investigation, but that's it. I didn't know really anything beyond that. Beyond that, he was in the meeting January 5th, and then he unmasked. He was looking at transcripts. He was part of the plot. He was part of the attempted coup. Senator Rand Paul, he's been on this for years, how the government, the ever-expanding government of the United States, and all of these intel agencies and all of these bureaucrats, and the power that they keep giving to themselves, and the spying that goes on, the data collection. Here's how he reacted yesterday to this revelation that Joe Biden also is on this list of unmaskers. Clip 7.
He needs to come out of hibernation, and they need to ask Vice President Biden what kind of person eavesdrops. Is that something that we think is a legitimate function of government, to eavesdrop on your opponents without a warrant, to illegally unmask them and listen to their private conversation? But this is an abuse of power that should not rest, and it should make every American worry that if Vice President Biden were elevated to the top office, would he again use this kind of power on political opponents? And the other side needs to realize this is exactly what they were accusing President Trump of, but he was actually acquitted on that charge. They have now found that Vice President Biden is guilty of using government to go after a political opponent.
They were using government. They did it in 2012, going after conservative groups, using the IRS. And then it expanded. They were using the DOJ. They were using the FBI. They were using the NSA. They were going after political opponents. He has some explaining to do, as the Wall Street Journal said. Sean Davis at the Federalist, talking about the leak to Ignatius. He says Ignatius was the first journalist to publicly confirm the existence and the substance of Flynn's calls, and to raise the idea that Flynn should be criminally investigated for them. Listen to this. Fired former Federal Bureau of Investigations, FBI Director James Comey, who sought to unmask Flynn's name on December 15th, 2016, cited the Ignatius article as a reason why the FBI needed to interview Flynn. You see how the leaks were all part of the attempted coup? Comey himself put in a request to unmask. And one of them, who knows who it was, perhaps Durham will find out, whether it was Samantha Power, whether it was John Brennan, whether it was James Clapper, whether it was Jim Comey. They leaked it to the Washington Post, and then Comey comes along later and says, well, it was very serious. We had to investigate because, well, after all, it was reported in the Washington Post. They're all in on it. That's why the media today, they're silent, because they've been exposed too. They've been exposed just as much as these Obama people. They're all Obama people. President Trump yesterday, here was his reaction, clip 8.
They weren't after General Flynn. They wanted him to lie about me, make up a story. This was all Obama. This was all Biden. These people were corrupt. The whole thing was corrupt, and we caught them. We caught them.
We caught them, he said yesterday. These people were corrupt. And if you listen to Devin Nunes, he's been right about everything from the beginning. And, well, Sam even noted yesterday just how confident he was back in 2017 when he was a lone voice, Congressman Nunes, and they wanted to run him out of town. They wanted him to recuse himself of everything. The media hated him. They still do, but they hated him back in 2017 because he was exposing a lot of this. He was seeing evidence that's only now coming into public view. He's been right on this Russia hoax from the beginning. And listen to what he said yesterday on Fox, clip 9.
It's even worse than this. I mean, you're only seeing the folks that unmasked General Flynn. The reality is there were a whole lot of other Americans on the Trump transition team that were unmasked, and those need to be made public also.
General Flynn, he's just one of many, says Devin Nunes. He's the one that authored the Nunes memo. He has been proven right. And he says, look, it's not just General Flynn. It's a lot of other people too. Targets. They were targeted by the Antiochus administration, an administration that wants to cast the truth to the ground, bury the truth, an administration that over and over again has been lying to the American people, lying to the media. And they've been getting away with it, at least to this point. When we come back, we'll transition to the pandemic and some of the comments that Anthony Fauci made on Tuesday. I meant to get to some of this yesterday, but I just ran out of time. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. We'll be right back.
This is KPCG-FM, and this is the Trumpet Daily.
A turning point in recent history has gone almost entirely overlooked. Since that time, an unseen cause has brought about national and world troubles in unprecedented fashion. Crises are intensifying as never before. In our generation, we are seeing radical changes to culture, family, education, religion, science, finance, politics, international relations. Everything has been affected. You cannot understand events without recognizing this unseen cause. The United States has been shaken in astonishing fashion. Have you wondered why the world's #1 superpower is declining so rapidly? Are you concerned about where the current administration is leading this country? The Bible provides penetrating insight into the invisible cause of society's decline. America is prophesied to fall before it rises again. The Bible also gives extraordinary insight into how that fall will come about. This insight puts the seriousness and urgency of current events in their true perspective. Understand what's in store for America and why. Visit thetrumpet.com and click on the Literature tab to request this free enlightening booklet, America Under Attack.
The Trumpet Daily.
I mentioned in the last segment how that the radical left is using COVID-19. It's the perfect cover for them. It's the perfect excuse for them to not talk at all about Mike Flynn, about unmasking, about all these transcripts being revealed. But they also see this pandemic as an opportunity. The radical left, they're using it as an opportunity to fulfill all of their long-held objectives. Look at the spending package that Nancy Pelosi proposed. They're loving this. We've got to destroy the economy. We've got to hurt Donald Trump. It's the same mentality that drove the Russia hoax. You see a lot of the same players. And now you have all the blue states that are saying we're going to have to stay locked down for a long time. And, of course, Anthony Fauci, the expert in chief, he's out front. He's leading the way. He's saying we're not even going to be able to open schools this fall. It's too dangerous. Well, in this testimony he had on Tuesday, where he said it's bad, it's going to get worse. He's been saying this for months, and he's been proven wrong, by the way, over and again. Here is what Senator Rand Paul had to say. This is clip 11.
You know, the mortality between 0 and 18 in the New York data approaches 0. It's not going to be absolutely 0, but it almost approaches 0. Between 18 and 45, the mortality in New York was 10 out of 100,000. So really, we do need to be thinking about that. We need to observe with an open mind what went on in Sweden, where the kids kept going to school. The mortality per capita in Sweden is actually less than France, less than Italy, less than Spain, less than Belgium, less than the Netherlands, about the same as Switzerland. But basically, I don't think there's anybody arguing that what happened in Sweden is an unacceptable result. I think people are intrigued by it, and we should be.
Now, he's bringing up Sweden, obviously, because they didn't lock down. They just encouraged people to socially distance themselves. Richard Palmer, he tweeted out this graphic comparing Britain with Sweden. You can see it there on the YouTube stream. Britain, total lockdown, peaked in April, the disease, 0.04% dead. And then under that, the economy torched, unemployment set to double. Sweden, on the other hand, no lockdown, also peaked in April, 0.03% dead, minimal damage, jobless rate holding steady. And so this is what Rand Paul is bringing up. Look, okay, you want to talk facts here, or evidence. Well, what about Sweden? Shouldn't we be intrigued, at least intrigued by what they did? By how they handled this crisis? And that was what was, I think, brilliant about the way Rand Paul approached his questioning. He didn't really even ask a question. It was more of a statement. But he just stuck to the facts. Here's a bit more, clip 12.
I don't think any of us are certain when we do all these modelings. There have been more people wrong with modeling than right. We're opening up a lot of economies around the U.S., and I hope that people who are predicting doom and gloom and saying, oh, we can't do this, there's going to be a surge, will admit that they were wrong if there isn't a surge, because I think that's what's going to happen.
I think that's what's going to happen, he says. I don't think there's going to be another surge. But what's not going to happen is these people admitting they're wrong. That never happens. That will not happen. It hasn't happened yet. Like I said earlier, it's not happened with the Russia collusion hoax. Now they're just saying, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. We've got to talk only about COVID-19. Okay, let's talk about COVID-19. Here's the statistics. This is what Sweden did. Don't talk about Sweden. Do not talk about Sweden. Do not talk about the declining mortality rate. Don't try to compare the percentages in the UK with Sweden. Well, what can we talk about? Just listen to Anthony Fauci. Just listen to the one expert. That's what we're supposed to do. Rand Paul, he's talking about the differences between New England, New York City, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and many rural areas of America, states like where he comes from, in Kentucky. Here's what he went on to say, clip 13.
In rural states, we never really reached any sort of pandemic levels in Kentucky and other states. We have less deaths in Kentucky than we have in an average flu season. It's not to say this isn't deadly, but really outside of New England, we've had a relatively benign course for this virus nationwide. And I think the one-size-fits-all that we're going to have a national strategy and nobody's going to go to school is kind of ridiculous.
He says it's just pretty much like a flu season in Kentucky. So a total lockdown right across the country, does that make sense? One size fits all? Is that the approach? Well, you listen to Dr. Fauci's team, and that's what they're proposing. That's what they're saying. One final clip from Senator Paul. This is clip 14.
We really ought to be doing it school district by school district, and the power needs to be dispersed because people make wrong predictions. And really the history of this, when we look back, will be of wrong prediction after wrong prediction after wrong prediction, starting with Ferguson in England. So I think we ought to have a little bit of humility in our belief that we know what's best for the economy. And as much as I respect you, Dr. Fauci, I don't think you're the end all. I don't think you're the one person that gets to make a decision.
Last bit, perfect. That's a nice way of saying, who do you think you are? How did you get to be the final authority on this? I like you, I respect you, but I don't think you're the end-all, be-all. And the doctor of doom and gloom, he did not like that. Now, he answered in a fairly nice tone. He answered. His response sounded fairly nice, too, but here's how he responded, and he didn't really, as I say, he wasn't even asked a question, but he asked if he could respond to what Senator Paul had to say, and this is what Dr. Fauci said, clip 15.
I have never made myself out to be the end-all and only voice in this. I'm a scientist, a physician, and a public health official. I give advice according to the best scientific evidence. There are a number of other people who come into that and give advice that are more related to the things that you spoke about the need to get the country back open again and economically. I don't give advice about economic things. I don't give advice about anything other than public health.
He absolutely has been giving advice about economic things. He is like Ferguson in the UK, the biggest proponent in the United States, the biggest proponent of a lockdown, locking down the economy, locking down the United States of America indefinitely. We've got to do it just like China. They have so much love and respect for the Chinese communist state. They've been in government for decades. Complete and total lockdown. He did ever so slightly back away. Look, I'm not putting myself out there as the end-all, be-all. In fact, as we've covered on this program, the experts are what got us into this chaos, this pandemonium. The experts are the ones that put forward the cure. Now, there's states beginning to come out of it, and President Trump, judging by some of his comments yesterday, he wants to lead us out. He said he didn't agree with what Dr. Fauci said about schools. President Trump, like Senator Paul, he said, look, this is not dangerous for young people. The flu is more dangerous for young people. Like Senator Paul said, if you look at the percentages, it's near zero for those under 18. From 18 to 45, what did he say? It was something like 10 out of 100,000. And then you look at the regions, it's confined for the most part to New York. And so who's done the absolute best job in handling this crisis? Well, the governor of New York. That's where it's the worst in the world. Just looking at the numbers. And what are the media? What do they tell us? Well, if we could just deal with this like the governor of New York, then maybe we could begin to get a handle on this crisis. John 8 and verse 44, the father of lies. There's no truth. No truth. Dr. Stephen Shapiro, he's from Pennsylvania. This was an article from a week or so ago. He said, as we prepared for the pandemic, we radically transformed our hospital operations to create a safe environment for patients and staff. We delayed non-urgent surgery, reducing it by 70%, and we scaled up telemedicine 38-fold, performing 250,000 visits in April. We indeed saw a steady stream of patients, but never surged. They prepared in Pennsylvania. They cleared out the hospitals. They delayed all non-essential surgeries, and the surge never came. The surge never happened. He says at peak in mid-April. The peak was mid-April. And the models, if you can call them that, the charts, they show this. The numbers, the facts. He says at peak in mid-April, COVID-19 patients occupied 2% of our 5,500 hospital beds and 48 of our 750 ventilators. 2%. As we've noted so many times before, there are people all across the United States dying every day. 8,000 or 9,000. 55,000 to 60,000 per week. This one, though, this one is supposed to lock everything down. This is a story about The Bild. That's the leading daily in Germany. It says Europe's best-selling newspaper announced this weekend the lockdown in response to the Chinese coronavirus pandemic was a huge mistake, citing a number of public intellectuals critical of the country's official response. It's a shame that some of those public officials can't get a Senate hearing. It says University of Hanover professor Stefan Homburg, a former advisor to the federal government, agrees official figures in Germany in no way justified the lockdown. It says in Italy, the coronavirus epidemic was worse than a flu epidemic. In Germany, it was less severe. With the lockdown, the federal and state governments have made a huge mistake. He says the damage is increasing every day. The cure is worse than the disease. The damage increases every day. And yet the experts, they're out there saying, look, don't lift any of the restrictions. Don't do it. People are going to die. Well, we've got to get back to normal. Are you saying that you're willing to sacrifice American lives to get back to normal? That's their response. It says the damage is increasing every day. All bans must be lifted immediately, he said. Empty soccer stadiums and half-empty restaurants are of no use to anyone. Lord Sumption in the UK, he used to be the judge, or a judge, I guess he's retired now, but he made some statements regarding this pandemic and the lockdown that it brought on a couple weeks ago. And here's what he said more recently, and I think this was a radio interview, clip 17.
According to the Office of National Statistics, 91% of the deaths have been with people with serious underlying conditions. 88% have been of people over 65. The number of deaths of people under 50 is so tiny that the Office of National Statistics isn't even able to show it on their colourful charts. Yet it is people who are fit and under 65 who are being asked to sacrifice not just their liberty, but their jobs, their businesses, and all the ordinary collective activities that make life worth living for something that hardly affects them at all.
The healthy people, in other words, they're being asked to quarantine themselves inside their homes, like Paul Manafort. House arrest. The ones that basically drive the economy, the engine, the economic engine of the United States and the UK. The under 60s who are healthy, hardly any risk. And yet, they're locked away, unable to work, unable to open their businesses. How much longer will it go on in the UK? Lord Sumption said in that same interview, he was quite critical of Boris Johnson and the statement that he made on Sunday, and just how there's no courageous leadership, no one to step up over there and to do what needs to be done. Well, I got a minute left, so let me just finish off with a few statements coming in. I think these are in response to yesterday's show. It says, I'm so glad I stumbled across this show. Live feed surfing. It really helps me get through my week, especially now that we're stuck at home. This is week 7 for me homeschooling 4 kids. So this comes from a mother who's obviously quite busy. But she's a new listener, Great to have her on board. It says, thank you. It really is so easy and natural to be discouraged by the negative. We just have to strive to also focus on the end result of all that suffering. Another one here says, common sense in an insane world. Windy, cool, sunny day in Ireland. Good afternoon. Another one says, this is from a 79-year-old listener. If you say we can mingle, then that's good enough for me. I'm 79, fit as a flea. I could never be quarantined for another 2 years. I'd rather go to jail, he says. So there's a listener that wants to get outside. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you could submit feedback to td@kpcg.fm. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again tomorrow.